I'm conducting an interview with Mrs. Livia Deutsch, and this is tape number 6. So, how long altogether were you in the camp?
Okay, I told you we came August 18, and by the end of March, the war was so close that the fighting literally was in our ears, and we could hear at night the fighting going on. So that would make it September, October, about 7.5 months, right?
And then what happened after that?
Okay, then finally, as I mentioned, there was no more work in the factory, so finally the order came that he had to evacuate the camp. I believe that the camp director had the order to evacuate because we still went out to work that morning, and we were called in around noon time that we have to come back to camp, and that same evening then we were told that we are leaving the camp. We're going to be evacuated. We have to run from the Americans. They're coming. Can you believe that? That was the last thing we wanted to do. We thought maybe we will be left here, and no, we have to run. They still, this is what one thing I must point out, because it may seem to somebody that since they were losing the war and it's coming down, perhaps they will change and become, nicer to you or something. Just the contrary, okay? Just the opposite took place. They were more in a hurry to kill us, to destroy us, and leave none of us alive. That was their ultimate game. At least that was the game of the real leadership. Possibly the director of our camp did not have this in mind. Perhaps perhaps he thought he had pity on us, he was used to us, he knew us. Some claim that he knew every single person. Personally, I had nothing to do with him, so I don't know that. But that wasn't, that's why he kept us working, so that we should still be useful. But on this day we had to be evacuated. This is the one time I came back to it where I saw the cruelty of some of the Algerians. They were then absolutely outraged that this is happening to them, and they tried to take it out on us. And the beating, the chasing, the screaming, the cursing was going on. But toward evening we left the camp. That same day in the evening. The plan was to march us at night. Why at night? Because maybe during the day it was would be visible or something, I guess. So it was only for the night. And that first night of marching was the worst, because we took what little belongings we had, which we had to abandon, and there was enough people to stand around, and they wanted us to march at a certain space, and that was very difficult. And I tell you the truth that after early morning, when we stopped in a barn to rest, we were ready to give up, because this was already more than, we felt it was more than what we are able to take on this march. Of course, food, they didn't have food, they didn't give us any food. But we rested during the day, and me and my sister, we always saved up a little food for the bedtimes, and we just lived on that little saved up. We rested a day, and we started out again the second night, walking, and how should I say it? Somehow we saw that most of the regular crew, the people who were with us in camp, disappeared. During the day they packed and they took themselves off. And they now had people who were just attached as soldiers to lead us. It was no longer the same crew that started us, except for the camp director. He was with us. Perhaps some of the Algerians were still with us. But we felt that we were loose. We were marched out of that evening without having a tail upper, without being counted. And don't you think the first girls realized it, and then and there they hid themselves, and that's it. The rest of us saw that, there are people missing already, and nothing happened, no one knows the difference. And the second night we slowed down a little bit the march, although then one German SS who must have known what has to be done came and threatened us with gun, so we had to march on. But luckily this time we had a lot of rest. Why? Because there was so many troops retreating, and when they needed the road, then we had to go on the side of the road, because they came with troops, with whatever, with trucks and things. And this is how we marched. And when they rested on the side of the road, then we marched on the road. And this night, somebody gave me one of these German soldiers, as we passed by and stood by the side of the road, he pressed something into my hand, a round box, and I could only think of shoe polish. You know how shoe polish comes in a round box? And I gave to my son and said, look, he gave me a box of shoe polish. But my sister was a little smart, and she opened it. It was a box of chocolate. I mean, I have never in my life had anything as wonderful, as uplifting as that piece of chocolate that we shared. We even shared it, of course, with a few girls near us. It didn't go too far. And by the next morning, we came to, I don't know where, Neustadt. I think we stopped in Neustadt. And this time they put us into a school building. And we could feel that it was a loose kind of a march. It was no longer that very tight, because we always heard that the Americans captured either the town you were last night, or Allendorf, what we left, is already occupied by Americans. Or Ziegenheim, where you were night before, but it wasn't what we thought it was also. Anyway, the next day that they put us down to sleep, they did not let us sleep through the day or rest through the day as it was meant. Early afternoon, they roused us out, and we going to march again, because there was no time already to rest. And this is when the idea formed in our head that we should try to escape. It seemed that we will be able to do it, and when we were by the outside, out of the town, and there were ditches alongside the road, and at one point when they weren't watching, somehow we sat down by the road, me and my sister, my cousin, and a few girls too, said, are you going to stay here? Let's try to escape. And we sat by the road, and the column went on, but the commander, after a while, must have noticed it, that missing. He turned around, he was riding a bicycle, then he came back, he found us by the road, and he said, we have to go, because the next village, we girls were going to be given bread. This was his rules. You're going to be given bread. We had to act like we naturally came, we just can't, we were so that tired. Come to the next town, you're going to be given bread. So there was one girl who had a big mouth, and she spoke German, and she said, we can't go now, we are so tired and whatever, and will you let us rest here, and we are going to follow you because we're desperately hungry for the bread too. We will come after you. And so he had to. Then she stopped some Germans who were evacuating some people who looked like they were important people. I don't know why, but this girl also stopped and said, would you please, she speaks in German, gentlemen, would you look at us? We're so tired and we're so weak. We would like to rest here. Would you explain to him and trust us? We shall follow you, trust. So he turned and he left us there, and she stopped him when he was already a few yards from us on his bicycle. Herr Oberchef, will you please make sure you save now bread for us, because it's going to take us a little while. She had the guts. And so he went, and as soon as he was out of sight, we picked ourselves up and we made a plan to go back to the town we stopped a day and a half before, because probably the Americans must be there already. We will walk back. How will we go back? We'll walk on the side of this is when we became non-Jews all of a sudden. We removed whatever was, there was the numbers, it was just a printed numbers sewn to our clothes. We removed the number, and we didn't care about the coat. The back of the coat was marked, whatever. We started to walk back on the side of the road. The road was full of people evacuating. Everything was going in one direction away from the Americans, and we took a direction toward the Americans.
How did you pass yourself off as?
This is what happened now. Naturally, the road was full of soldiers. They did notice that we were unusual, and we were stopped and questioned. This is when we said we were Hungarian. How do we get this idea is that before we got here, we saw that a lot of evacuees, we even met Hungarian soldiers evacuating. And there were all kinds of different nationalities. So we saw that it is possible for them to they have Polish, they have French. Why can't they have some Hungarian people working in Ziegenheim? We said we were working in a factory. We were Hungarian women, we were working in a factory. And the factory is closed down, so we're going to Ziegenheim, we're going to look for work over there. And we were always let go. Even if I remember some who claimed, I know who you are. But still, they didn't have the time, or didn't have the will, or didn't have whatever. Some reason we weren't stopped, and we marched the whole afternoon. We just walked and walked. This time nobody was chasing us, we chased ourselves. toward evening we reached the town of Sigenheim, and this was still considered something of a town. And but when we got to Sigenheim, this is when we first lost our nerve, because there were some officers, they were directing the traffic, their soldiers, and one noticed us and left everything was doing. It takes his bicycle and starts riding around us. And we got so terrified, we ran off the road and we ran into the fields, whatever was around. It was a small town, and in no time at all, we were still in the houses. We ran into the field. We were perhaps 12 or 15 girls then together. There's safety numbers, I suppose, but this time we broke up and we ran to two different directions. And some of the girls ended up hiding out in, I don't know, in a cemetery or a swimming pool, whatever. We found the barn because it was a pretty close. There was a large barn, and we ran up to this barn, and the door opened, and there was maybe 60, 70 girls already hiding in this barn. Those are also girls who got away.
From the same camp?
Sure, they were also hiding there, because this was along our road. And so we got inside, and nobody had food. It was a little, dispute among us. And next morning, I think, there was fighting outside. At one point, they were running around the barn and shooting the retreating, the SS. And luckily, they did not go inside, because it would have meant nothing to them to shoot us off altogether. But no one ever entered the barn, and we were safe. And the following day, we saw the white flags. We were not too far. It was visible white flags in the town. The road was not too far from us, and we figured they are giving up. I don't know how many hours later we saw American tanks on the road, and then we saw that the Americans must be here. There was just a matter of going out. We did not know. We were scared. We didn't know how to go out, whom to approach. We were so unsure. We didn't even know what we were or what would happen to us. And luckily, one of the girls had one of the German foremen from the camp who became very friendly with one of the girls, was aware that this girl was hiding because he was telling her, he came by when we were there, and he said, "Hier bleiben" means stay here, do not go with her. So he knew that she was there. Perhaps he knew there were more of us, I don't know. He lived not too far. He went to the American commandant, and an American soldier, perhaps a Jewish one or two of them, two American soldiers, he brought them out to the barn, and that's when we were out. And this must have been the very first time that they ever saw people like us. They had no idea what we were doing here. We had to explain, and we asked, did you liberate anybody? Not yet. Later on, yes, but that time they didn't even know of such things as Jewish girls being in Germany. The Americans at least had no idea. We had to be very much the first ones they ever liberated, because we were liberated even before Buchenwald, which was a nearby camp. That was liberated maybe in the middle of the month, but we were free, must have been about the third day, on the 4th or the 5th of March, a month before. Of course, that was a hate. When we were liberated, this was definitely the last good feelings probably that I had in my life, okay? Because at that point I thought I was free. We will go home. This is what breaks me down, at least. We didn't know exactly how the war was going. This is what happens when you're locked up and isolated from the society. We did not know exactly what happened to Europe. And we were told to go find places in a school, some farmers, whatever we could find. We stayed in a school. Eventually we were moved into a German house where they gave us a room, they gave us food. And the first thing, wanted to know how the trains are running. We were going to go home. So stupid. We found out that the whole Europe is burning, and there is no trains, and it's going to take a while. And I guess the liberation was over, and we spent the summer, then we were promised, waiting to be transported. Now, because we were so far in Germany, it was not easy to arrange for a transport to go back to Hungary. And some people attempted it on their own, but that was a terrible thing. Just get on trains and continue to go on trains until you get closer to the Hungarian, not the Hungarian border, but you had to get out of the American zone and into the Russian zone, and things were very, very different in the Russian. The Russians did not acknowledge the Jewish person is a refugee or something special, and they treated them as if they were enemy, and they had a lot of difficulties, those who attempted to go home by themselves. By the way, this here was another of my observations, that the war wasn't over and we were liberated, and I said, what if the Germans again come back and take over? I said, I will climb on one of their trucks and I will not be captured. I said I would never be captured by the Germans, but they never made a comeback, the Germans. They were out. And eventually the war was over. I remember when the German soldiers said the war is over, but they weren't so jubilant because they said, now we're going to the Pacific. The other war was going on. I remember this for a fact, that instead of they were glad, but they said we have to go to the Pacific to fight. That was in May, the war was over. And then we really started to find out about survivors and accepting the truth, which was some people knew, some people suspected, some people didn't. If those who didn't believe it had to believe it too, that we didn't have, nobody from the other side of Auschwitz survived. And this left me with the impression that my parents and my sisters disappeared from my life. There never was a day when they were the last time I saw them, there never was a day that I said, oh, but my parents are dead, oh, my sisters are dead. To me, they disappeared. Somehow they disappeared. And so by the time they did have a Hungarian transport to go in after the summer, maybe in September, October, already people were coming back and telling us of conditions in Hungary, and it wasn't very desirable, and we had to face it that we had absolutely nobody left in our family, that it's only the two of us, that we will not go back to Hungary. And it wasn't an easy decision because there wasn't anywhere else to go to. We now entered out of a small camp into a larger place where we still had no place to go to. And we lived, after a while we were assigned houses where we could live, houses that were evacuated by the SS, where they used to be people who escaped from the Americans and left their houses. So we had a place to stay. We were given a lot of assistance from the Americans. The organization was called the UNRRA, UNRRA. I think we called it the UNRRA. They provided us with food, clothing, assistance. Certain American Jewish chaplains from the army would visit us, because there was a whole group of us that visit us. There were some Jewish social worker types who came uniformed. They also came, and eventually we were even connected by Hayalim, that means from the Palestinian Brigade, Jewish soldiers under the English army who were interested in us, and they wanted to be helpful. Then we found out about going to Palestine at that time, and we volunteered that we want to go to Palestine, but it took us a very long time until anything was done, because things weren't that easy.
What did you volunteer with?
I mean, we volunteered with this. There was like a, how should I say it, a representative from Palestine, yes. And of course, others wanted to go to America, but I, for my part, would have loved to go to Israel. But of course, that took almost a year and a half or something. In the meantime, my sister got married in Germany still. And about a year and a half, we were organized into a group of what they called an illegal aliyah. And that involved a difficult trip. We had to cross the border from Germany to Austria. That was one illegal trip. And that too was such a complicated, such an amazing trip that I thought I remembered it so well, and I would have liked to record it, what we went to. One night we climbed the Alps between Germany and Austria to get into Austria, and it was early summer, and we climbed in the mountain where there was snow in order not to be detected, because already there was so much pressure not to permit Jews to move from one country to the next, because they would go to Palestine, and the English, they didn't want you in Palestine. Neither did the Arabs, and the English were the right people to help along their cause, I would say. And we crossed into in Austria, and were picked up then. This was very well organized, but not always successful, by the Palestine, I don't know what would it be, the name of it. But everywhere they had from Palestine, they had soldiers and civilians who were helping you along. They didn't call them Haya. There was a special name, unfortunately, it doesn't come to my mind. This was like an organization who they designed these roads so that people would change places. So we were in Austria. It took us for a while. From Austria we had to cross. Austria was still American. From Austria we had to cross into the French zone. Now that was the French were also not to be outdone by the English. They would not let displaced Jewish people cross from the American zone to the French zone, because heaven forbid they will try to go to Palestine. So we had maybe 3-4 attempts to cross the border, and we were caught, and we sent back, and we were caught. But on the third or fourth time we were able to get into the French zone in Austria. That was a big step. And there we stayed in a very nice area. I mean, the mountains were beautiful there. Had a little place where legally it held, I don't know, a kibbutz, like it was legal, but illegally they had hundreds of people hiding there. From this place we had to go to Italy. Okay, so we were taken to the Italian border, again trying to cross that border, and it never worked. It didn't work. What we had to do, at one point there was a march of 500. This was the time when the UN was discussing the creation of Israel. And they wanted to show that we were willing, so we were the volunteers. That's what we were in, actually, a group of 500. They were special. This was a special group. I was part of it. I just realized it. Our small Aguda group was part of this group of 500. We were willing to. This time we crossed also in the night, but 500 people, and they couldn't stop us, so we crossed into, crossed into whatever we had to go to, or not in Italy yet. This was still from the French zone to another zone or some such thing. Perhaps an American zone, so I may not get it completely right. Okay, we had to from Germany to Austria, from the American to the French. And yes, I think when we went from the American to the French, then they made a group of 500 people so that the guard could not stop us. So we went into that. But don't you think they forced us back again? We stood a few weeks in that French zone, and then they forced us. They literally came with trucks and with all with guns and whatever. And we tried to create a hunger strike, but nothing helped. And they even sent an American from the UN, and he said, "Es hat keinen Zweck, nicht zu folgen." So our people said, he's saying, "Es hat keinen Zweck, nicht zu folgen." We should not listen, and we should resist it. But no amount of resistance would let us stay. We were taken back. And here we go, and then we smuggled ourselves back into the same place, and then from there to Italy. Also, 2-3 times we are caught on the border. The 4th time we make it across the border. We give them some money. We got on a bus. We got to Milano, and we settled in Italy. We went to small town, Lucerna, in Italy, where they had a villa for us. We spent their time. Meanwhile, the entire illegal oleo was stopped because the English caught as sheep, instead of putting it to Cyprus, they sent it back to Bergen-Belsen, so that stopped the whole thing. And eventually, about a year and a half later, Israel was born. But by then, somewhat before that, it was so hard, this life of no home, no real life, that we registered for the American, for an American visa.
So
and just about then, that visa came. By the time the doors of Israel became open, we had the visa, so we came to America. That was, well, for me it was 1949 February.
What did you do in Italy for all that time?
Huh?
What did you do in Italy?
Then I was in the kibbutz. But we always, first of all, we took care of ourselves. Secondly, there were lectures and preparations. We tried to, to get ready for some kind of a life. I learned Hebrew, we learned regular classes also. And this was, yeah. But at one point in Italy, I went into a displaced camp. And there I finally, because you needed to establish yourself as a displaced person in order to get a visa to emigrate to America. So we got into this displaced camp. And there I got a job in the office. Because over there too, there were certain jobs. Okay, I worked in the office. During that time, I was already an office worker. The office was run by the English, and
so
it was part of that UNRWA that I mentioned before. I remember that was the main source of help.
So you realized you wouldn't be able to make it to Israel, or?
We already by then we could have made it legally, but then we had this chance to go to America, and frankly I was tired of this life on the run. I was longing for a decent. My sister was married with a child, the second one on the way. They wanted already a home. So I couldn't go anywhere without my sister. I couldn't break this up.
So you came to America?
Came to America, and we settled in Brooklyn, and I got married about 1952. I got married in 1952, and we lived in Chicago for a few years, then we moved back to Brooklyn. This is where the Jewish life was happening, and this is where we wanted to be part of.
Okay, we're just about to change tapes.
Okay, so go ahead and change.
With Mrs. Livia Deutsch, this is tape number 7. So you were saying you got married?
I got married in 52, and I had I stopped working then. Before that, I kept working wherever I could find work. Usually an operator, machine operator. It was a big thing then for somebody who was able to, and I knew how to operate the machine.
In what?
Clothing, human, ladies wear, whatever. I was able to fit in. Wherever I found that work, I did it. If I didn't do so good, I learned it.
Did you have any children?
Of course, I have children. I had 4 children, 3 boys and a girl.
What were their names? What are the names?
Abraham, Shlomi, Chaim, Malka. Okay?
Did you ever go back to your hometown?
On a visit, but at least 25 years after the liberation. I believe at that time, I think I was 40 years old when I went back. It was a strange thing to go back after so many years, and I remember the feelings. It was, the day after we arrived, that was under communist rule, and it was, even our arrival was so unpleasant that that night, the first night we started in Budapest, my husband was of course with me, we said, we just came to tell them we'll never ever come to this place again. So we both revisited. My husband went to see, we went to see his hometown, and then we went to see my hometown. I'd seen the places, I see the site. I made no human contact except 2 or 3 neighbors, old neighbors, who were still living in the same house. Of course, I wanted to look at my house, and I was only able to see the gate. The people who lived in it were away at work, and we only had a very short time.
What was their reaction to you, the
Then,
neighbors?
yeah. Well, let's see. One neighbor first, I went in. A neighbor in whose house I remember playing so much, being so friendly with their daughter. They had one daughter. Her reaction was one of surprise. And then she asked, well, one of my older sisters was very good friends with her own daughter. And her own daughter, of course, went on to glory and whatever. She got married and she moved and became something. And where she said, well, where is Bershka, which is the nickname of my second sister? Well, my sister was killed in Auschwitz. And my sister was a brilliant girl, an excellent student, talented, capable. And her life was cut short while she, this Christian woman, was bragging to me that her daughter, whose name was Maria, is married she named a town, and her daughter, her grandchild, is studying to become a doctor. So you can imagine the feelings that you get from this kind of meetings. And then I had another neighbor, literally the next house to us. There were such anti-Semites that we had a very bad relationship. We had a war together, but they were, certified anti-Semites and Jew haters. And I did stop by her because I wanted to ask who is living in the house. And I had a short conversation with her, but there's nothing that, is remarkable about it. And I was just as glad to get away. I was sorry I couldn't get inside because I thought I will find something. I will find an old picture or something to remember my parents, but this time I didn't get in at all. So we just visited the sites. We went to the cemetery because I was told that there's a beautiful monument of all the people who perished from the town, and we found the monument, and this was something that I saw for the first time. I tried to look. I went to my old school, which still was existing as a school, but I was able to go all over the school. The place was empty. It was somewhere, but it wasn't locked up, so I just had a leisure tour of it. The synagogue was totally abandoned and in disrepair and emptied out. And it was just locked up. It was an abandoned place, and we went in there to see what became of what was once a community. And I could just see my father, the place where his seat was, and it was a very, very painful thing to be there. And this was the only thing that I can tell you about this visit to my hometown.
Are you still a practicing Orthodox Jewess?
Yes.
Many people would not expect someone to have lived through your experiences during and after the Holocaust and still remain a religious person. What was the nature of your outlook during the experiences you faced in the camps and afterwards? How did you view God, and what has maintained your faith?
I will only answer to the last one, what is maintained my faith. I will not, because the first two questions are two, I wouldn't be able to pinpoint what was my view of God or things like that. I took this pretty much granted. That was part of my life. And getting back to religion was shortly after the war already. We were connected with somebody who knew us from our hometown. He came to visit us in Germany and wanted to offer him food. And just as afterthought, he said, by the way, this is kosher. I said, what, kosher? And we didn't have any kosher. We were far in Germany, and there was just a girl there. And he said, what, you are not observing kosher? Children of such, he was from our town and he knew our father. So immediately we reverted to kosher food. This is how we went back to kosher. Once we get in contact with Orthodox Jews, which were at a distance, more toward München, I would say, we were by Kassel, where there was no Orthodox. Once we were able to contact Orthodox groups, people with Orthodox standards, then we just very simply reverted to our old habits, and that was that.
What effect have your experiences had on the way you have raised your children?
Well, what I meant to tell you is religion helped me. I will say that even though I was in America and I was married, and I did have very difficult times after. They were very, perhaps, depressed or despair, because it was very hard to come to terms with what happened to you, and being so different and so strange, that the religion was a great help in the sense that it tell me always what to do. Now it was Friday or a Shabbos or a holiday. The religion always was there for me to conduct my life by. You know, I could depend on it. So it was very important. The religion became eventually the thing that helped me to steady myself in my life. Without the religion, I would give in to despair, and that feeling of after all, it's a terrible feeling. You know, I struggled with this feeling of not having parents. At times I felt, but I'm in this world and nobody in this world cares about whether I'm alive or dead. For all, you know. So these kind of feelings could really affect you in a difficult way. So in that sense, as I told you, religion was a very important vehicle to stir me back into more of a normal life. As for the children, there was never any question. My husband was even more settled in the religion. I married an Orthodox person, and so this was a natural continuation of being Orthodox, that the children had Jewish educations.
But in terms of the Holocaust, how do you think that affected raising your children?
I have no idea. I am sure that it affected them some way. And when I was younger, I had no desire to have too much discussion about it. But some years ago, when we were already all matured and I wouldn't have minded talking about it, but they didn't seem to be. They were scared off from that or something. They did not want. Perhaps they just wanted to spare me the aggravation. I don't know. But my children did not insist on it. I'm sure they know. And until this day, I'm unable to straighten it completely out with the children. So this talk maybe will help. If they ever see it, perhaps they will understand more about me even than they did until now.
Do you have dreams about your experiences?
Of course I have dreams, but we don't want to go into that. I had dreams from the very beginning. I had disturbing nightmares, and I still could get into a nightmare. Just all of us, yes, you do get a nightmare from this.
What sort
I
of
do.
things?
The nightmare has to do with being persecuted, usually the simplest I could explain is that I'm back again, I am going to be taken into the camp or something, and then the feeling that I permitted this to happen to me again. It's not that I'm a child that after all this, somehow they got to me and I'm going to be taken into this camp. And this is what I consider a nightmare, a standard nightmare about this. To dream that you are being taken into, you will be taken, and it is helpless, you let yourself being taken into. This is as close as I can come to it. Others are not up for discussion. Not every nightmare is open.
Finally, do you have a message or statement you would like to give to the world, your grandchildren, and future generations?
Well, it wouldn't be the same message to the world or to the children or the generation, okay? To the world, in the simplest form, all I can say is, you had no right to do this to us. Which is a stupid thing to say, but this is how I feel. They had no right. Where they will pay the price, I don't know, but sometimes when things happen, I said, well, here you go. You don't realize it, but you are paying a price. Because they had no right to do this to us, what they did to us. This is the message to the world. Now, who else do I have to give a message?
To your grandchildren or future
The
generations?
grandchildren. To my own children, I would say, don't let it happen. In the sense, I watch the news and I see how they write and act toward Jews, and it brings back memories of what happened to us in Hungary. And I say, don't let it. Don't let a little bit. Do not get into this frame of mind where you will accept certain amounts if you can only just stay alive. Don't. From the minute you notice anything anti-Jewish, fight it, be against it. Do not let them go one step, because you give them an inch, they'll take it all. That's what I feel about, And I see, I'm very disturbed sometimes from events in today's world, that I seem to be biased against Jews. And to my mind, it doesn't lead to anything good for us. And it's got to be stopped right in the beginning. That first word that he said, that anti-Semite should be reacted to, and not wait until it's a pile, it's a mountain. Does it make sense? This is the world. Now, who else do I leave? To my children?
Your grandchildren?
I will tell my children
Daugh-
one thing. They were the vehicle, the thing that helped me, to go on with my life. Truly, for the children, I could go on. But for this reason, they were the thing that brought me back into my life, back into life. My children. That's how much they would mean to me.
Mrs. Deutsch?
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
Would you like to introduce the young lady sitting next to you?
This is my daughter, Marky Kleinman.
And is there something you'd like to say to her about your mother?
I'd like to thank my mother that although what she had gone through in her life must have been very, very difficult, she always was able to talk about it with me. And I never wondered about, I know there might have been a lot of parents that were never able to talk to their children. She was always able to share with me her experiences, about her family and about what she actually went through when I was old enough to understand. And I think, looking back at it now, it's been very helpful in knowing, what she's gone through and where she came from. Of course, she wasn't able to tell me everything, but I never felt like I didn't know what went on. I always felt like I had some understanding of what she went through. And I'd like to thank her for that.
I don't think there was anything else I could have done, except what went on.
No, it's important that you shared it with me because otherwise, I wouldn't have known.
Thank you very much.
This is a picture of my grandfather, my father's father. This picture must have been taken in Sarvas. This is where he lived, I believe, all his life. It came to me probably from my uncle who did survive. One uncle survived the war and had some of the pictures with him.
And what was his name?
His name was Chaim Schwartz. Oh, you're going to tell me. This is a picture of my grandmother, my father's mother, also taken in Sarvas sometime before the war. Her name was Schendel. Her maiden name was Margaretten. This is the copy of a very old picture of my father. He was a soldier in the First World War. He's standing in the third boat from the right. In the back, there's a little dot where he marked a space, and that is him. His name is Salomon Schwartz. And this picture was taken in Prague in 1916. The date is on the back of the picture. This is a picture of my family before the war. I will describe the people. Right in the top is my oldest sister, Rosa Schwartz. To the left is my father. Next to him is my sister, Erzsébet. Next to her, my mother, Stefania. Okay, now I go to the bottom row. I am right there in front of my father. That's Livia Schwartz. Next to is my younger sister, Eva. Next to her, another sister, Margit. The only survivors are me and my oldest sister.
And where was this taken?
This was taken in our own house. I remember the occasion.
And what was the year?
It seems to me that I was still pretty young. It may have been 1935 or 36. This is a picture taken in front of our house. In it you will see my oldest sister. I am on the left, and my youngest sister.
What are their names?
My sister's name is Rosa Schwartz, I am Livia, and my younger sister's name is Eva. This was taken probably around 1940. And the both of us, we are both survivors. My little sister perished in Auschwitz. This is a picture of my father with some of his students, taken probably around 1940 or 42. My father's name is Solomon Schwartz. The picture was taken in front of the school where he was a teacher. The students' names I do not remember anymore. I may have known them as children, but their names I don't know.
How did you receive the photograph?
This is a picture of my second sister. Her name is Erzsébet. This is a graduation picture taken in Kecskemét, 1940 approximately, and the picture is dedicated to our grandparents, to whom she sent it. This is a picture taken in Germany, 1945, a few months after our liberation, and I am actually the one at the right end. I am Livia Deutsch. My sister, Rose Spitzer, today, Rose is next to me. Next to her is Hella Gross, our first cousin with whom we were always together. And the fourth person is a close friend, Maria Schumann.
And where was this taken?
When?
Where?
This was taken somewhere in Ziegenhain in Germany in 1945, I believe still within the year 1945, after the liberation. This is a picture taken in Austria, I think in the neighborhood of Salzburg. We were traveling from Germany to Italy, trying to join a group of people to go to Palestine. This must have been taken in 1947.
And who's in the picture?
The picture, well, my sister Rose is on the left and I'm on the right side. This is a picture of my engagement taken in 1950 in Brooklyn. My husband, Zoltan Deutsch, and myself, Livia Schwartz, soon to become Livia Deutsch. This is my oldest son, Abraham Deutsch, on his wedding day to Rachel Deutsch. The picture was taken in Brooklyn, 1986, February 9. This is my son, Shlomi Deutsch, on his wedding day in Brooklyn, March 18, 1979. His wife's name is Fredi. Her maiden name was Framowitz. This is my son, Chaim Deutsch. He was the twin brother of Shlomi. He died in a car accident in January 20th, 1986. He was not married. This picture was taken at his brother's wedding. This is a picture of my daughter, Malka, on her wedding day about 14 years ago. The wedding took place in Brooklyn, and she's married to Yehiel Kleinman. They now live in Muncie. This is a picture of my grandchildren, taken, I believe, for our 40th wedding anniversary. The children surprised me with it, and it's one of my favorite. It was taken in Brooklyn. And I will start from the left top. It's Esti Deutsch, Heidi Deutsch, Schleimi Kleinmann, and Jitzi Kleinmann. Then Abraham Deutsch, Hani Deutsch. She's holding Baruch. No, wait a second. Yes, she's holding Baruch Deutsch, Baruch Chaim Deutsch. Second row, Ariella Deutsch from my second son, Abraham's children. Ariella Deutsch and Chaim Deutsch. Now we go back to Ruhi Deutsch, Malki Deutsch, Hani Kleinmann, and Kuzi Kleinmann. These are the grandchildren. I don't have the birth dates at the tip of my fingers. I can tell you the picture was taken in Brooklyn. And since then, this is a couple of years old, we have one more addition to the family. This is my youngest grandchild, Nachmi Deutsch, born in Brooklyn in June 1996. And the parents are Shlomi and Fredi Deutsch. 5 years ago, I went to a reunion in Germany to the labor camp we were during the war. And this is a book that was put together. And the name of the camp is visible. And there is a memorial erected on the site of the camp. And the book has a lot of information about what went on in this place during the year of 1944 and 45. This is a picture of a memorial plaque that was erected in our hometown. I found it when I went back for a visit. And the names of all those who perished in Auschwitz are on this plaque. My parents and sister's name is in the right column, beginning with the name Schwartz Salomon. My mother, who is listed as Stefania Gross, and my sisters Schwartz, Böschke, Manzi, I believe, and Eva. These are nicknames. This is how the people remembered them. This was erected in around 1945, and I went back many years later, and that's when I saw it for the first time.